Have we got Simon and Andy? Why is so Andy's not on the members list on ModGov?
Oh yeah, I had to update that.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Perfect. Right. Are we live? Oh, splendid. Thank you. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the November meeting of the Joint Archives Board for Dorset Council and Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. My name's Councillor Laura Becker. I'm Cabinet Member for Communities here at Dorset Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting. We may be joined in due course by two of our colleagues remotely, Councillor Simon Christopher, Councillor Andy Martin, but joined in the room here at the History Centre by fellow members Councillor Richard Biggs, Councillor Leslie Dedman and Councillor Marion Lepoidbez next to me. Other people who are here, I imagine, will introduce themselves in due course, because there's quite a few of us around the table. So, excellent. We've had this morning a lovely tour of the History Centre and the archives. It's been super interesting. So thank you, Sam, and your team. Let's have a quick look. Right, agenda. Apologies. Currently, we don't have any apologies, but obviously if our two colleagues don't get to join us in time online to join in with the meeting, then let's accept their apologies, because I know that they're elsewhere and probably rushing towards a laptop as we speak. Item number 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest that they would like or need to make? No? Excellent. The minutes of the last meeting were held, gosh, was it January? Gosh, that's such a, okay. So I think actually we were all here. So you've had the minutes. Does anybody have any questions or points that they need to clarify about minutes? Can anyone remember that far back? Right, excellent. Okay, fantastic. So the minutes are confirmed then for the record. Public participation, we don't have any public questions and no one's banging on the door. Questions from members. We haven't got any questions from other colleagues or anyone in the room, so we'll crack on. We don't have any urgent items, which is excellent. So as always, it is now the Sam Johnston show. What we're going to start with is the budget monitoring, the proposed draft budget for next year, and then we've got a couple of other items which I'll introduce as they come. But Sam, do you want to walk us through the budget?
Chairman, yes. I'd also like to point out my colleague Paul Ackroll, who is our service accountant, is here. Paul will any inaccuracies in my sort of so yes, in brief summary, the budget for the next financial year, that's 2023 to 24, is proposed as a standstill budget. The detail of it, of course, is in there. We've looked at our outgoings, and the current budget of £613,107 would be maintained if this recommendation is agreed. It would entail, as a consequence, a saving or a reduction in our outgoings anyway, £50,000 in order to meet that threshold due to inflationary costs associated with pay, energy, and the other additional costs associated with the service. We would meet that outgoing or that demand, that £50,000 pressure, through the removal of a post of a colleague, the office manager, who was due to retire gratuitously perhaps in May, and she's confirmed that. So that budget saving would be a direct benefit to next year's, making it next year's budget balance. The functions currently provided by our office manager would have to be picked up in other ways, principally through the Dorset Council property team, the assets and regeneration team, would take on a large part of the buildings management that we currently do ourselves here at the History Centre. Other savings would be made across the range of controllable spend that we have, which are relatively small, but we are able to make some degree of saving. And any vacancy management that arises, although albeit turnover here is pretty small, we would obviously look to try and that way as well. The rest of the report really is supporting, I suppose, that premise, making that saving. We provided information about the actual budget totals, the savings undertakings that we try and make here anyway. We hope we're a very frugal service anyway. We tend to watch our costs because they're all above the line anyway. As a shared service, everything sits within a budget code and a budget line, so we know exactly what's being spent on what. This would be the eighth standstill budget in 10 years. So we hope we're able to accommodate this, if that's the right term, absorb it at least. Next year, I think thereafter, as I had probably have said within the report, there are no other savings that wouldn't impinge on staff reductions, but obviously we'll come to that if that occurs, if that arises in due course. Walking through the report, therefore, we provided statements from Dorset Council. I know Matty provided me with some text for the BCP budget position in paragraph 4.1, and we weren't able to get that into the report. But Matty, I don't know if you'd like to, wanted to update.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think what I've given you, but I think in summary, it's probably very similar to Dorset Council's position in terms of that we're extremely challenging budget for next year. We're having to make really difficult decisions, and I think in the context of that, it's kind of necessary, if not fortunate, that we've had to kind of support a standstill budget for the archive. No reflection of the quality of the service, merely it's part and parcel of the wider efforts that are having to be made to agree that balanced budget for next year.
Other details, I suppose, to just reference are the reserve position, which is currently, I think, Paul, if I got this right, £67,000, although there will be some drawdown on that year end due to costs associated with maintaining the building, pressures on costs associated with maintenance, repairs and maintenance budgets. Oh, I missed things. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Sam. I think just to express our gratitude, 8 out of 10 standstill budgets is really quite impressive. And you are a frugal service, and we know that across all local authorities across the country are having to watch their wallets. It is a challenging landscape, so thank you for your part in that, because it is appreciated. Has anybody got any questions on this item? Richard?
Around the office manager's position, and how that's going to be managed. Is there any downside for that sort of transfer of service sort of remotely? Just staff having to do things that was done, is that going to impact on their time horrendously, or is it just an opportune moment to do that?
I think there's probably two parts to the answer. Anyway, one is yes, it will be difficult. We will transition to efficient property services, which is what our property colleagues are calling the transition to managing all Dorset Council buildings, whether they be the History Centre or a local office. So we'll all be managed in a similar way, which I think is probably a good thing. There'll be standardisation and I assume cost savings as a result of that. There will undoubtedly be some adjustments required because it's a fairly complex building, but we're already talking to property colleagues about how that will be done, the things that will be done locally and the things that will be picked up centrally. So there will be I'm sure there'll be a period of adjustment around that. Other aspects of what the office manager does certainly will impact potentially on colleagues around finance and administration, but we're looking at other ways of devolving some of those roles or those bits of work to potentially to other teams if they can pick them up. Things like invoicing and those sorts of things, which I know I'd personally be hopeless at. It would be ideally. So we're looking at a range of scenarios where we can integrate with other teams to provide those functions, which aren't going, therefore, I've been asked this question by colleagues here necessarily, what's it going to mean? But I think we can mitigate certainly most of the impact by working a little bit more smartly than we've been able to do so far, and talking to the other teams in the council.
So supplementary to that, would there be any, would the public and customers notice any difference in service or anything?
I sincerely hope not. I think this is very much say that now, but it's very much an internal function that obviously the public don't see what goes on behind the scenes generally. I would hope not, but obviously until we've got some time to prepare, which next May, of course, when this will, and we are already looking at the ways of overseeing the transition to that process in hopefully a way that would not impact on the work that you saw discussed earlier, Luke and colleagues in the public service team. So the hope for it is it would be absolutely minimal, if at all.
Thank you. And it's a good question, Richard, because obviously we're looking at that elsewhere in the council, aren't we? We're smartening up and transitioning into different ways of working as the opportunity arises. And so, I suppose it's not dissimilar to what's happening elsewhere. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I was going to Carol
Campbell, sorry.
Chairman of the Dorset Archives Trust. I was going to ask a similar question, but Sam, are there any risks around the ability in terms of the environment for the archives? Are they at risk at all in turning it over to a generic maintenance facility?
I'd be the first to be extremely uncomfortable if I thought that was true. I think what we need to do is continue the conversations we've been having with colleagues around. There are certain members of the property team who are very well versed in what goes on here. After all, they deliver those services now. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a communication question. There are some things that for example, when monitoring the environment in our repositories, our conservator Jess has that on her desktop, so we know if the humidity is rising too high or if the temperatures drop too low, that sort of thing. Ensuring that we maintain that the correct linkages between property team and the contractors who will come in and deal with the plant here, for example, the kit which maintains the environment. I think that's the critical part. We've certainly got some learning to do around ensuring that there aren't gaps which drop, but so it turns out nobody was aware that it was their role. And I think I wouldn't claim that we've got everything fixed as yet, but obviously one of our key things is to ensure that those repositories work as they do now, and we don't have any gaps.
And you can upgrade any SLAs that need to be upgraded to make sure you'll have a rapid response.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That is reassuring. Anything else on the budget? In that case, these have to be proposed and seconded. So is there anybody who will propose this? Leslie, thank you.
Happy to propose.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Demon, to propose. And do I have a seconder? Richard, Councillor Mix, just to second. Thank you very much. That's approved. Where do we go next? We go back to Sam for the capital project update. Now, this one is just, this is for noting, and we don't need to propose, second or approve it, but it is nonetheless important. So, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as I think everyone here is aware, this proposed extension to or the accommodation of archives here at the History Centre, as those of you that came on the tour earlier will know, we are now reaching very close to capacity in terms of storage. For 10 years now, we've been looking at ways of providing additional storage. The long-term plan has been to extend the repositories that we currently have to provide another 22,000 or so box spaces in the right environmental conditions, but with largely passive environmental controls. And the means to achieve that there's always been hoped, at least, that we would be able to go to the lottery, the Heritage Lottery, to acquire a large percentage of the costs, around 2/3, to achieve that. So that's been our long-term proposal. In recent times, obviously, we're acutely aware of council budget restrictions and limitations. So what's happened is that we've needed to go back and check our facts and figures and look at the proposals, ensure that the options that we had been assumed to be the correct ones were the correct ones. The alternative to providing on-site additional storage here is to look at a longer-term external storage solution, which would be a pay-as-you-go revenue budget scenario. So we have gone back and checked our figures. We've had accountancy colleagues and property colleagues look at this, and it's gone through the processes within Dorset Council for scrutiny and challenge, and the cheapest long-term solution remains an extension to the History Centre based on an approach to lottery. I had always worked on the assumption that around a third of the costs, the match fund, as I tend to call it, would need to be provided by the council, by Dorset Council, as per the joint agreement 2022 joint agreement. I spoke to Lottery recently to confirm that was still the case, that given the fluid world of local government finance, that's still the situation. And I got back the qualified sort of response you might expect from a funder, which is, well, you could come in lower if you wanted to. The quality of your bid would have to be absolutely proportionately superior, if you like. The risks would, of course, increase to Lottery and they would diminish to the council funding, but it would be possible. An arbitrary figure I've just plucked out of the air, 20% potentially rather than 33% might be possible. So that again is something that is a live issue or potential question for those making the decision. And to bring everybody up to date with where we are now, all the relevant information has been provided to the council's capital programme team. The ultimate decision on the provision of match funding for this project, in other words, our ability to approach Lottery, because without the match funding and the written commitment from council, well, it would need to be both councils, in fact, but Dorset Council as the lead, as the owner of the asset here at Dorset History Centre. Without that, we could not approach Lottery. So the decision on that basis, I believe, will be taken at Cabinet in January, early in 2024. If it is a decision in favour of providing match funding, we would then revert to Lottery, talk to Lottery about our next steps, provide an expression of interest, which is where we'd need to start the process and begin that process of revisiting and reinvigorating our bid, our application. If it is no, it's not possible. I know it's a highly competitive environment, capital programme. Then we would need to look at what does that mean for this service longer term, and those commercial outstores of the type that I described. The most obvious one is a company called Deep Store that operate in Cheshire in former salt mines. There would be the implication for transporting archives to and fro, which other services, including National Archives, have to do at times. And there would be that ongoing compound revenue cost, which over many years would accrue, we think, to a substantial sum, but at the beginning would be quite small. So I think I hope I've covered, just looking at Lisa there, I might have missed things out there. I think I've covered most of the pertinent points in the current situation.
Brilliant, thank you, Sam. And I think, certainly looking at other areas, certainly in Dorset Council, wherever we can use any, capital funds that we might have to leverage funding from outside, we're always really keen to do that. And I will be, supporting this to Cabinet. So fingers crossed, because it is the sensible thing to do. Shoring us up with a revenue cost in the future is when we have the opportunity to try to get external funding is obviously not ideal. Okay, brilliant, thank you. And it says here that we'll get a further update in January. Obviously that will be post Cabinet, so then you'll be able to go back and work out, depending on what the decision is taken by Cabinet, what the next steps are. Did anyone have any comments or questions on that, Richard?
I think it's for us, not for us to make that financial decision. I think we're here to the best interests of the arts. I think clearly it's got to be done. It's been saying for years. We have to support it. a very difficult decision for whoever doing that in January 24, isn't it? I think we have to do it on. You know, we can't keep kicking the can down the road. You know, it's going to come to fruition.
Yes. Absolutely, and you know, and I will be fighting the corner. January.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, just for the benefit of the BCP members, to clarify the point that Sam made around how it's paid for, given it's a Dorset asset, it would be for Dorset to decide to approve it, but it would be for BCP to contribute to the process by way of the cost share. So depending on how it's funded, typically there'd be a revenue impact on the BCP budget to pay that. Any borrowing or the interest in particular, just so that's kind of how it works really. It would be the opposite in the case of, say, the coroner service, which we host. So it's the same kind of principle that's adopted.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you. Okay.
So can I make sure I've understood what Matt is saying?
Yeah.
That BCP would not contribute to the match funding, but on the ongoing costs.
Yeah. So typically it would be if depending on how Dorset decided to raise the match funding, if it was through borrowing, then we would normally contribute to the cost share to the interest payment.
Yeah.
Because we don't have an interest in the asset in its, you know, if it were disposed in the future, we wouldn't have an interest in that. So that's how it kind of works out. It's not a 50-50 split in the way that we might normally expect.
Thank you. Okay, well, in that case, I think noted. And we move on to the Joint Archives Service Development Plan Monitoring Report. We have got some catchy titles, haven't we?
Sorry.
But you know, I'm just keeping us on our toes here.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, and
Barely got it on the line.
you didn't. It's on 2 lines. And who would think it? But we're back to Sam.
I apologise. Yeah, sorry, droning away. I'll try and be relatively brief because I think those of you that were here will have heard much about what the service does through the colleagues who explained it better than I could. But it's as the report suggests, there are some. It talks through the key outcomes from the last year, and I would again reference digital preservation, our consortium, the fundraising for the Hardy cataloguing project, which is nearly there. Some interesting work we've been doing around adoption and care experience people's records, which we hope will lead to a change in the approach to retention to ensure that those records are preserved for longer than they currently are. And I'm really pleased to say we have 2 members of the team here, the public service team, who have now enrolled as apprentices on the level 7 scheme, which is a master's level qualification, which will take them 3 years, poor devils. But they're very enthusiastic about it. We are too. It's really great for the service and for professional development. So we're very happy about that. And a further colleague in the records management team is also doing it. So we're kind of blessed with 3 of them at the moment, getting on with that. I think the things I would probably pick out of here, without going into huge laboured detail, we've covered the 2 kind of key pressing issues I think for the service at the moment are the accommodation on the one side, which we've discussed, and I think our real interest and hope that we can improve the way in which we acquire council records. I've talked to Matty a little bit about this. We need to improve. It's a 2-way street. We need to improve the means by which we acquire the records of BCP Council in the same way that we do Dorset Council. I do have concerns that the corporate memory function that we should be providing isn't being properly used. So it's not necessarily, this isn't a finger pointing thing at all. It's merely observing that we need to do better. We need to acquire those records, whether they be physical or digital, and working out the ways in which we achieve that, I think, is really the important thing.
Chairman, can I just come in there?
Yes.
The BCP. I'm concerned as to why this is happening, because I had no idea. I don't know why we're not getting these records over. Perhaps I should address it to our office.
Well, I think we have previously discussed it, and we've discussed it with Councillor Martin as well, haven't we? And
it certainly hasn't been shared with me.
No, and I think there might be just a need to maybe tighten up some of the sharing with children's services.
I think it's from service to service.
Different services. I think it's maybe not
I think you're right, Chair. I think the relationship is different from service to service, and having a common approach across both Dorset and BCP, we've not established that very successfully yet. So there's probably further work to be done. I would accept that. Yeah.
I merely highlight it's not to. This isn't, as I say, it's not about blame at all. It's really that we know we need to do better here. We're conscious of what we haven't been getting in as much as what we have been getting in, and sometimes we are quite passive in terms of our collecting. As you heard earlier, we require people to come to us. Having the capacity to go out and shake the tree a little and remind people that records should be coming in is quite time consuming, and sometimes you're not quite sure who you're supposed to be speaking to, but we know we need to do better. So I really raise it as something that on our list of ways we need to improve, and bring in those full records of the authority.
Just wondering, could we have that as an action for the next meeting to have a report?
I think that'd be really, really helpful. Whether we need a specific report or whether it can be provided as part of, as part of a development report. I mean, from me looking from the outside, it's about having those named contacts. It's about knowing where you can go for that information and having that relationship. So I think an update would certainly be helpful if you guys are happy with that.
That'd be great.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. That's really helpful.
Section 5, I've just talked about the work of our colleague, Museums Development Advisor, because it runs parallel to the Archive Service. It's a Pan-Dorset function, and there's lots of really good activity that's been going on there from just from the one person. I won't dwell too much on any of the other areas particularly, because I think you've already heard about those, and I don't want to bore you to death. The one area I would like just to raise, if I may, is section 11, which is around a proposed closure period for the Joint Archive Service, which we are suggesting, if you approve it, would take place in January. A closure period, it's a temporary closure period, I should stress, rather than anything else. It would allow us here in the service to work on things that backlogs of things that simply we just don't have the time to do. They're quite standard practice across the archives sector. Certainly in the Southwest, many services do these things. They're well publicised, so to minimise the impact on users, so that we're not having people turn up at the door, angry and confused at why we're not open. We deal with public inquiries over the phone and email, and anything urgent from either of the councils, of course, as well. But the benefits I've listed in 11.2, it simply means we're able to better manage collections that are sitting there, and we just don't have the time to deal with them any other way. So it is a sort of quid pro quo. Entirely appreciate, but if you're supportive of it, I know the team here are very keen to have this closure period to allow them to address some of the things that need to be done, which don't get done any of the time. And
I think that's really sensible. Could you just highlight how long you're thinking of closing for? Not months, is it?
No.
Right, so only a couple of weeks.
2 weeks.
Right.
2
So
weeks, yes.
I just wanted to bring that out, to draw that out, because it's not months and months. And I've already checked with Sam that actually what are the numbers of disgruntled punters who are knocking on the door after their map, after their piece of history. And we think probably in January, not terribly many. We can manage that through communication.
Well, just time of the year. Yeah.
So, I mean, personally, I think that's a very sensible thing to do, to give staff a bit of breathing space and catch up. And, I hope colleagues would support that. Yeah.
Is it, well, Sam, if this is something, is this a new initiative or is it something you've done in the past?
We've not done it here, simply because it was always the view taken quite a long time ago. I've not actually requested of the board in recent times, but probably 10, 12 years ago when it was first mooted outside of a formal application, public access was deemed to be absolutely essential, and we couldn't do it. But I would certainly say from observing the volume of material that we've had come in and the other jobs that could be done better, I think by providing this period of 2 week closure would mean, I think, substantial benefit to the service and to the public ultimately, because we can find things better.
And would you look to make that a yearly closure, like a regular event?
With the board's approval, and obviously subject to annual review of need and so on, then yes, I think so.
Seasons, and we all know places that have a winter closure period, don't we? And 2 weeks is nothing in the grand scheme of things. Not going to hold up people for that long. So, I mean, Certainly.
Yeah. I would suggest that we agree it for this year,
Mhm.
subject to review from the archive side, from
Yeah.
Sam's side.
If it works for,
If it works, then we'll probably want to continue it. But
Yeah.
we're not committing to do it annually until we're sure it is useful and has worked.
that's very sensible. Are you happy with that? Sam?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, was that,
So that's, I think sorry, just to conclude, again, you'll be familiar with the service development plan proper, you'll find
Yeah.
it in the appendix. I don't think there's any surprises in there in terms of the RAG rating for any of the activities or work streams. The only one that's received a red, simply because we're not able to move forward with anything at the moment, is the capital scheme. Everything else is either under review or going ahead.
well, in that case, I'm going to just use my privilege as chair to immediately say thank you, because I find this is definitely not my favourite board or anything. But I just find this really interesting to read, and the breadth of what a relatively small team does. And certainly Vicky over in museums. I mean, we've been out on so many visits with Vicky recently, with David from the Arts Development Company. And it is a relatively small team, and Vicky's a very small team, it's just Vicky. But the impact of the work that you do and that she does is so wide ranging. And I just think it's fantastic, and I love reading these. And you just said you don't want to bore us to death, but I don't think I could ever be bored by this. Sometimes we all read as councillors, don't we, some fairly dry reports. But this is really real, and it's really, I just find it really interesting. Anyway, enough fangirling. Does anybody else have any comments or questions they'd like to make on this?
You really, Chair.
Absolutely.
No, merely to say I agree, Laura.
Oh, Simon. Sorry, I didn't see you coming in there. I wasn't looking. I was looking wrong.
No, merely to say I agree wholeheartedly.
Lovely mug as well. Not your face, your face, but
Thank
the coffee mug is very nicely patterned. Anyway, cruising on. We need to seek a proposer in a second.
I'm happy to.
You're happy to propose, Marion, and Leslie to second. Fabulous. Thank you very much. I think we gave that a good airing, and I finished it in a very professional manner. Right. So having a bit of a week of it. Yesterday at cabinet, I was not as slick as I'd like to be, but we won't worry. We're back to Sam again, shock horror, for the review of fees and charges, and this is probably something we need to look at quite carefully, although I think it's very sensible. So Sam, do you want to introduce this one?
Yeah, thank you. Annual review of fees and charges, as has been mentioned. The headline is that the across the board, approximate 5% increase in line with council policy on fees and charges. So we're doing our utmost to meet that requirement. So the appendix to this report, you will see clearly laid out, I hope, the proposed uplifts in charges where they're happening. It's not uniform, as you'll appreciate. Some of the charges are quite small, and the percentage uplift would be not hugely beneficial or helpful. So we have uplifted where we felt we can and where the market will hopefully support it. I think the one qualifier on that is anecdotal rather than scientific, but we certainly have had a degree of pushback in recent times on the charges that are levied in certain areas, mainly around digitisation costs, because they tend to be one of the most asked for services. It's by no means a suggestion that we shouldn't uplift the charges. It's simply reflective of the fact that in some cases, we're possibly reaching a point where public appetite for paying certain charges is being reached.
I think that's true. And I think, certainly across other services, I'm thinking particularly of bins and garden waste. We know that there's a threshold. We know that there's, in people's minds, that's as far as they're prepared to go. But I mean, flicking through, it still seems really quite reasonable. I mean, I'm looking in particular at the, on-site talks and lectures. An increase of £3 for up to 12 people is really not going to, put too many people off. So this seems to me to be very proportionate and very sensible. And as you say, in line with other things. Do you think that that there's more concern over being asked to pay for digitalisation services because it's not a real thing. And so people kind of think because it's, do you know what I mean?
Yes, and I also think people don't possibly understand, and it's for us to explain better
Yeah.
what's involved in actually digitising something properly.
Yeah.
It's not just getting your phone out and taking a picture. They have to be retrieved from the repositories. They have to be placed on the platinum, and sometimes if flattened out and prepared, digitised. The image then has to be properly processed. Particularly the big files, the TIFF files that we produce for some customers. It can take quite a long time in certain instances. So I think it's a very fair charge we're levying, but some people think it's simply a snap and go.
Yeah, and I think because we're all artists and photographers, aren't we? Because it's all on our phone. So people maybe don't quite appreciate the breadth of the physical work that's required to go into the digital stuff. Any comments, anybody, on the fees and charges? Richard?
Say 5%, is that an average across looking at the whole? Because some of them have gone up hugely, some 20%, 25%.
Yes.
One photocopying's gone from 25p to 50p.
It is a kind of a selective uplift in certain areas where we feel that the cost can be borne more easily than other areas. So broadly, it's 5% of the total is what we're.
So has there been any sort of consultation with users about these potential rises? I don't think we had sort of similar rises the year before, so ongoing. It's
It hasn't been directly with customers. No, I mean the feedback, as I say, is sort of anecdotal rather than scientific. Most people appear to be comfortable paying them, and some very few, a very small minority, are not. But in terms of actual consultation, no, there hasn't been.
Any other comments, colleagues?
My only thought is whether the on-site workshops and trainings, which are scheduled to go up by basically 50p a head, whether the market would stand a little more than that.
Good point. Yeah. 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 I mean, again, that does jump out as particularly good value. But I mean, do you want to take that away, Sam?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, in the absence of any further questions or comments, thank you for a sensible report. And proposer and seconder. I'm not allowed to propose stuff as chair. Excellent. I'll propose this one. Why not? Do I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Don't want anyone. Anyone. Brilliant. Marion.
I think technically as chair you don't
Look
need a
at that.
seconder. That's
Well, I'll give Simon a go in a minute on the next.
He didn't actually doesn't see him react.
Right, now we go into the review of policies. This is for us to endorse. So does this need a formal approval, or do we just sort of agree to a good, that Andy lobby? Splendid.
Yes, but I think what in terms of governance, it's important for us to be able to say that the board has viewed, reviewed, challenged if necessary, where necessary, the policy suite that we have here as a service. There are the 10 policies. Obviously, they are, as most policies are, not terribly exciting reading, but they're important elements of what we do. They all cover off aspects of the service. That there was one new policy from the last time these were reviewed properly was 6 years ago. Okay. The way that we're scheduling this, bringing this to the board, is in line with our review of accreditation as well. We hope to take our application back to the National Archives later this month, assuming these policies are approved, to be reaccredited, which is a 6-yearly process with a 3-year sort of light touch review. So it's important that the board has reviewed these. All I would say in broad terms is that most policies are largely, as you might expect, as they were last time, with certain changes. Clearly, we've had to take account of LGR, the fact that we now have a different governance structure. And in certain areas, things have been changed. Our acquisition policy, for example, has been tweaked slightly to take account of changes in the way that we acquire records, and to ensure that there's clarity around what we collect versus what other organisations might collect. Okay. For example, Poole Museum, the Heritage Zone in Paul's Library, to ensure that there's clarity on those things. Around equalities, for example, in our policy, we're keen to ensure that we meet and provide equitable access to the History Centre for volunteers. So things around, for example, uplifting the expenses that we're able to offer volunteers. In terms of collections information, that is a new policy which has come in. That was as a result of accreditation and being told we really should have one. So that's collections information is about the information we provide about what's here. So our catalogues, our processes for describing and defining what is in the archives. So it's all that's very what's the word, esoteric possibly, that one. The others I hope are speak, anyone who reads them, they're intuitive. We've gone through them for a sense check to ensure that they read properly, that they are comprehensible. There's no sort of hopefully not too much archival language in there which is inexplicable to anybody, and that the policies are readily accessible and also balance out against other services. So we've sense checked all of these. We hope they're provided in the appendices as you see. I hope that the board finds them reasonable reflection of what we do here.
Thank you. And actually, that was going to be my comment. Was going to be that actually they are really worded quite normally.
Yeah.
In a refreshing departure from local government speak. And actually, I have sat and read them because it's my job. But it did jump out at me as being really quite accessible and really quite, as I say, refreshing. It's really nice to read something that I think actually I could sit down with a friend and they would read it and kind of get the gist of what you do. And I just think that's really nice. Could you go and tell the rest of the local government sector across the country how to do it, please? The only comment I have is where you mentioned the volunteer policy and that equity of access and equality of access. Did that get a run past the Dorset Council Equalities Reference Group?
We've recently done I'm not sure about the full policy, but we did an EQIA fairly recently, and that has gone through to the Equalities Office.
Brilliant.
Group. Yeah.
Brilliant, because I'm sort of aware that it's there and they're desperate to be used, and desperate to be helpful and to really embed that equality piece. So I'm really pleased to hear that. Thank you. Colleagues, any comments? Everyone's very well behaved. Hi, Simon and Andy, for joining us online. Hello. We're just on the last item.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you perfectly.
Lovely. Can I just apologise? Obviously, I think you knew I was going to be late. I apologise for being even later than I said it was going to be, but that's down to the late arrival of the inbound Air Festival meeting, which is now departed. So apologies.
No problem. I hope they came by private jet to the meeting.
Controversial.
Okay. But if there is anything that you would have liked the opportunity to raise on any previous items, I'm not formal in this board, so please just jump in and shout. The review, so the review of policies is the last item, and that's what we're chatting about at the moment. Do either of you have any comments that you would like to make on these policies? They seem very, very sensible and very accessible to me. Yeah.
I certainly don't. Obviously, we had a conversation at our meeting the other day, didn't we, in our sort of pre-meeting, so I'm very happy. So thank you.
Well, you have commented that it uses clear, plain English, which is to be commended.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you can take that as a ringing endorsement of your policies. And that being the case, simply to thank you for your shouldering of the whole meeting, which I'm grateful for. And we have no exempt business. So at 12:14, we thank everyone and close the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just wanted to thank Carola and the to support our work.
It's our pleasure.
Fundraising, it's really, I mean, the things we acquire, we actually buy for the service from auction, from dealers and so on, couldn't happen without what the Trust do. Hardy project is backed by the Trust, and without it, we would be sort of 15,000 off our
And
total.
we're
So
nearly there.
And it's lovely to have you here. It's lovely
Thank
to
you.
have that level of commitment and interest
No,
that you come to these meetings. So I'm grateful.
hugely supportive of Sam and the History Centre. Very pleased. Looking forward to the capital project.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great meeting to be at. Okay. Thank you.